Hi everyone, welcome to this video. In this video I'm going to show you how to use watercolour, so school watercolours, to create a Quentin Blake picture like this one. So I've done a picture for you that you can just colour in to practice your watercolour skills. Now, just a note in saying, at the end of this video I show you how to do this effect at the end. Having done it now, I wish I hadn't. I wish I'd just left the plain paper white. But you can make a choice of your own. You can try to do that effect if you want to. In this video, I'm going to talk a lot about some different techniques that you use with watercolors, some materials that you're going to need to use. And before you really get into Quentin Blake's style of drawing, you really need to know how to use watercolors. So you're going to need to practice these skills over and over again. You're not necessarily going to get them first time. Watercolor is one of the most difficult mediums to work with, so the paints to work with, because it's a little bit random and sometimes it doesn't always go the way you want it to, and so you have to learn what works and what doesn't. So hopefully this video is going to help you improve your watercolor skills so that you can draw better Quentin Blake drawings. Hopefully you're going to enjoy this video, so let's get going. Here I've done a picture in the style of Quentin Blake. As you can see, this bird with all these people sitting on top. And I'm just going to show you how to use watercolour. I'm going to show you a couple of techniques, and then you can have a go at colouring in this picture yourself with watercolour. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to talk about the equipment that we have. So the first thing you're going to need is a brush. Now this is a round pointed brush. This one's a size 6. So you want a relatively large brush like this one here. You don't want to go too small because they're only used for detail. So the brushes that you want to use something big that holds a lot of paint. The small brushes don't, okay? You're going to need a cup of water, clean water. This is almost clean. A palette, and these are the watercolors that you're going to be using in school. Now, obviously, I've talked to you about the watercolors that I would normally use, but for this one, I'm going to use exactly the same watercolors that you would use, okay? And I'll talk you through some of the things that you need to know. So first of all, let's talk about faces. So first of all, the first thing you want to do, load up your water on your brush, okay? And if you've got, and you want to get rid of some of your water, just use the lip of your water pot like that. What you don't want to do is necessarily put too much water on things. Watercolor is all about control, okay? And you can't have control if you have too much water. And then I'm just going to use this color here. So this is my basic light skin tone. And you can see here, I just drag my brush across the surface of this colour, okay? And then once I've got enough here, I'm just going to put some of that into here, and then I'm just going to add some water to it, a bit more pigment, and I'm just going to build this up so that I've got enough water and enough paint to cover what I need. And it's always better to do too much paint than realise you haven't mixed enough. So that's going to be enough for the light flesh tones, okay? So that's just one colour from here, this one here, which I think is the peach, and I'm going to use that first of all. Now, talking about watercolours, what's really important to understand is the difference between, so here is a set of really good quality watercolours. These are professional grade watercolours, and the only difference between these ones and the ones that you're using in school is all about the pigment. Okay, so professional watercolors is rich in pigment. Now, pigment is very expensive. Certain colors are very expensive, okay? And so the higher the pigment in your watercolors, the more expensive they're going to be. Now, school grade watercolors will have pigment in them, but they have a binder which holds the color together. And usually it has more binder, which means they sometimes look a bit more chalky, or they may look a little bit more opaque, which means they're not as see-through as professional grade, because pigment is much more transparent, and the more binder you have, the more see-through and chalky, or sorry, not see-through, the more opaque it's going to be and the more chalky it's going to be. So that's the main difference. Okay, so what you just tend to need to think about here is how, you need to think about maybe adding a little bit more water to this and using a bit more paint than you would with the professional ones. Okay, so that's just a by the by, that's an extra little bit of information about watercolors. Okay, now, so I'm just going to go in here, I'm going to do a few of the faces, and so let's do this man here. We're just going to come in, do his face, and then I'm just going to do his hands. not worrying about going over lines. Now, you can see here it's pooling a bit, which means I've got too much paint on my brush. Now, you want to keep yourself tissue. I'm just going to get rid of some of that and be a bit more controlled. And then that means I can just come in and do the colours I want. And let's do this boy here with the same colour. Okay, so that's his face. And there's his hands. Okay, now, like I did in the other lesson, what you want to do is, if you've got a big dollop in here that's too much, you can dry your brush off on a bit of tissue like this, okay, and then you can lift out the pigment, lift out the paint with the dry brush, and you can get rid of these pools if you've got too much, okay. The other way is called blotting, where you would just take a tissue, you'd go straight down and straight up, and that would take most of it off, and then you can come in again and work on that. Okay, so that's the first technique, is just laying down a very simple one-coloured wash. Now, what's important with watercolour here is you want to make sure that this layer is dry before you add the next one, okay? Because if it's not dry, it will bleed into each other and it will change the paint, and the two will mix together on the page. And that's called a technique called wet in wet, and I'll show you that technique later on when we come to do a bit of the bird. But at the moment, what you want to do here is leave that to dry. So I'm going to go to a completely different part of the drawing, and then let's do another colour. So this time I'm going to use a darker brown colour for the darker skin tones. Okay, so I'm going to take this brown here, which is burnt umber, okay, and I'm just going to put this one in here. I'm going to take the pigment. Now, the key to good watercolours is the amount of paint you have to water. So at the moment, this is quite thick. Okay, so I'm just going to add a touch more water. I don't dip my whole brush in. I sometimes just dip the tip in if I want to get a little bit of water. So that looks okay. Okay, and I'm just going to try that on my tissue. That's not too bad, you can see. Okay, so I'm just going to take that up. And then we're going to do these faces here. So there's that face and the hands. And then this one. And then let's do this little girl here with the darker skin tone. Okay, and then just move that about. And so I'm quite happy with that. I'm just going to do that little bit of her leg there. All right, so that's the two skin tones done. They're just single colours. Now, what I can do here is, if I allow it to dry, I can come in and make that darker if I want to. I can add another layer. And because watercolour is translucent, okay, mainly, when you add a layer on top of a layer, it becomes darker and darker and darker with each layer that you do. And I'm going to show you some layering effects later on, okay? But for the moment, I'm quite happy with how the faces are done. So you could pause here and do your faces. Why don't you do that? Why don't you pause the video now and do the faces on your drawing? And I'll come back and I'll see you in a bit. So the next thing we're going to do, we're going to look at doing some other parts, maybe with just a single colour. So in this one, what I'm going to try to do, I'm just going to grab this yellow. Now, the important here, you can see that I haven't cleaned my brush off properly. I've left the brown in there. So you need to make sure, especially when working with yellow, you've got a really nice brush. Now, if this water gets too dirty, you can just go and change it. You want to try to keep changing your water as much as possible. And you notice with this brush, what I do is on the tissue, I'm drawing it back and twist. I'm drawing it back and I'm twisting it so it makes a nice point, okay? And so what I'm going to do now, because I'm going to put some water on here, and to clean it, all I'm going to do is blot out that brown and go back in with some more water. Okay, and then hopefully what we'll get is we'll get a nice yellow colour. So I'm just going to, my normal way, drag the pigment back. And because this is yellow, I'm going to keep this in this part of the palette over here. Now, the key thing about watercolours, you will always want to keep your blues away from your yellows, and make sure you keep that away, because you will get green very quickly and very easily. Okay, I'll show you what I mean in a minute. You only have to get a little bit of blue in there and it will turn to green. So that's enough yellow. I don't need too much, so I'm just going to add a bit more water, take my excess off, and then I'm going to use this. So on this one, I'm just going to come in and I'm going to do the beak of the bird. Okay, nice and simple. Okay, and then what I'm going to do as well, I'm going to mix in a bit of that brown that I've got from before and mix that in with the yellow, and I'm going to use that to do the bird's legs. You can see that's a brownish yellow for the legs. Okay, and then that's that part finished. So I've done the legs, I've done the beak. Why don't you pause the video now do the beak and do the legs, and I'll come back and see you in a minute. Okay, so we're ready for the next part now, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do the main part of the bird, okay, and I'm just going to do a nice bright colour here. So I'm just going to choose this turquoisey blue here, and I'm just going to mix up some of that into my palette. I'm going to mix quite a lot because I'm going to need quite a lot of this, and I might want to use it later because I'm going to show you how to layer as well. So I'm going to do one layer in this blue and then show you how to layer over the top to create some textured effects, okay? So I'm just going to make up a lot of this paint, like so, okay? And I'm just going to add a little bit more water. Just going to dry my brush off and then come back in, okay? The reason why I dry my brush off really is because then I've probably got too much water in there, and I want to keep the amount of paint I've got in control. So I do waste a bit by putting it in there, but in this case, what I want to do, I just want to make sure that I haven't got too much water. So I get as much off into the palette as I can, then dry my brush off, and then I come in and pick up some of the paint. Okay. Now what I'm going to do now is just not too carefully, but then as well thinking about, you know, not always necessarily keeping within the lines. Quentin Blake he doesn't worry about getting in the lines, and if he misses a little bit out, like here, a little bit of white shines through, it doesn't matter. So the idea is you want to try to be as quick as possible, but as careful as possible at the same time. Okay, you don't want to be going in and try to go really carefully like I'm doing here, because it's going to take you too long and the paint's going to dry. What you want to try to do is get the paint down as quickly as you can and as controlled as you can, and don't worry if it goes over some of the lines. Yeah, it's gone onto that trouser leg there, but I don't mind. Okay, just get a bit more paint, and I'm going to come up a little bit of these tail feathers because I'm going to show you a different technique for the tail feathers. So that's the bird's body. I'm just going to come over some of the bits. I can go back in, leave some pulls. Okay, and so that's the bird's body in a nice blue. Okay, just going to come in around those fingers a little bit more. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow that completely to dry, because I'm going to show you a technique, wet on dry, which is layering. Okay, so I'm going to show you a little bit later. So I'm going to allow that to dry. Okay, so why don't you paint the body of the bird? You don't have to use the colour I've done. If you want to do it red, you can do it red or blue or purple or orange, whatever colour you want. So why don't you choose a colour to use, but make sure you create lots and lots of paint in your palette. Okay, and remember, keep your blues away from your yellows. So I'll come back in a minute and show you the next part. Okay, so hopefully you've done that. Now I'm going to leave that blue to dry. I've still got some of that blue left here, so that's fine. I don't want to clean that up. If it dries out, I can reactivate it by just adding some water. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you another technique. I'm going to leave that to dry. I'm going to show you another technique, which is wet and wet. And for this, you're going to need to create all your colours in one. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a little bit more of this blue, okay, to make sure that I've got plenty. Okay, and then I'm going to come in and I'm going to choose this red right here. Okay, that's a nice bright red, and I'm just going to take that red and I'm just going to put it somewhere else on the palette near the blue, but not mixing in just yet. Okay, I might mix it up a bit later on, but at the moment I'm just going to make two piles of paint. I'm going to do some red and I'm going to do some blue. Okay, nice and simple. So there is my red. Okay, just add a bit more water to that. Okay, now I've got two colours. Now you can do 3 colours, you can do 4 colours, it doesn't really matter, but I'm just going to keep it really simple and show you a very simple technique. And I'll show you on one of the bits, the feathers that are coming out of the bird's head first of all. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to come in with my blue, and it's really important that I do this pretty quickly, and I'm just going to come halfway up the feather like so. Okay, and then before it dries, I'm going to wash off my brush. I'm going to pick up some of this red, and then I'm going to come into the blue, and you can see now, okay, I'm just going to put the red at the top of the feathers first, and then I'm going to just merge this in, and you'll see that suddenly the blue and the red mix together to make a purple. And what I'm just doing is I'm just going to drop some of this in. So this is a technique called dropping in, wet in wet. Okay, is I'm going to drop some of this red just into the blue like so. I'm just going to tap it in. Okay, I can do it wherever I want around here. Okay, even into the dry parts if I want to. Okay, but can you see the technique that it's made? It's made the blue go transitionally into the red. And that's called wet in wet. So that's one technique. So I'm going to do that on the tail feathers again to just demonstrate it again. Okay, so I'm just going to make up some more of this blue. And then I'm going to make up a little bit more of this red. Okay, that's got some of the blue in it, so I've already mixed it on the palette. So there's the red. Clean off my brush completely, and then what I'm going to do here, let's try it the other way this time. Let's start with the red on the end of the feathers, and then see what happens if I then go down towards purple. In fact, what I'm going to do, I'm going to do the red this end, just like this. Okay, sort of 3/4 of the way down the tail feathers like that. I'm going to make sure there's plenty of red, okay, and plenty of water in there. Then I'm going to come in, I'm going to get some of this blue, and I'm going to bring that blue up to the red. Once I touch the red, I'm just going to bring it back again, okay, like that. And I'm going to try another technique. This may go badly wrong, okay, but you never know unless you try. Now, sometimes what I do is I have a separate piece of paper to do this on, but I'm just going to take some of this yellow, okay, and I'm going to try something else. I'm going to bring that yellow and just drop that in on the ends of the tail feathers here, and what that should do is make that red and that yellow mix together to make an orange. Okay, see how that works? So that is a technique called wet and wet, and if you want to blend it, it's also a way of blending. You can see it goes from blue to red to yellow. Okay, now I can mix that in. The key is you work in it when it's still wet. That's why it's called wet in wet. Okay, you're adding wet paint to already wet paint. Now you have less control, and sometimes you get nice happy accidents, which means, you know, I really like the way that's worked, but if I try to do it again, it might not work the same way. So, but it is a nice technique, okay, if you want to get nice transition of colour. Okay, so why don't you have a go at that? You can either paint your feathers one colour or two colours or three colours. It's up to you. But why don't you have a go at just seeing if you can do that technique and see how you go. And I'll be back in a minute. Right, in the next part, what I'm going to do in this part is I'm going to do the clothing of all the characters, and we're going to work on the hair. Okay, so this bit's going to be a bit long, so you can choose whatever colours you want for the clothing, but I'm just going to show you a few different ways of doing it. So the first thing I'm going to do is going to mix up some colours. So I'm going to take this colour here because it looks a little bit like the colour of jeans. Okay, it's a nice blue. It's got it's a bit of a cooler blue than the other one. Okay, it's a bit darker, so that's my first colour. I'm just going to keep that blue. Okay, second colour, I'm just going to do some more of this really nice rich red. Okay, I'm going to make that nice and bright there and add plenty of pigment. Now, because I've mixed in my blue a little bit, it's turned a little bit purple, but that doesn't matter too much. Okay, I want a red, and then I'm going to take this really nice bright green. Okay, now let's just get some of that on there. Where possible, try to always, you know, you will see me, I do treat my brushes a little bit badly. This is not very good, but try to just move it in one direction when you're doing that. That's a bit minty, that green. So I'm going to try this one here, which I think is leaf green. So let's try this. So let's have a go at this. Let's get that onto the palette in another spot. Okay. Now you could just mix each colour as you go, but I'm just wanting to do this at one time. So I've got a green, I've got a blue, and I've got a red. Okay, so while the green's still on here, I'm going to decide, right, what do I want to be green? So what I'm going to do is this lady here, I'm going to paint her top nice and green. Okay, so that's her top, all done. Okay, and then that's that done. Okay, so, and then I'm going to move on. I'm going to wash out my brush, and I'm going to give all of them, or most of them, mix up a bit more of this blue. Okay, I'm going to give them all nice blue, so most of them nice blue trousers. And look, you can see the slight difference in the colour of her trousers compared to the colour of the bird, and that's quite important. Oops, I just made a mistake there. Get that out quick. Okay, now I'm just going to mix up a little bit more of that blue, and let's do this boy. He's got a pair of jeans on as well. Okay, nice. Okay, and then the girl, I'm just going to give her some, actually I'm going to give her some of this green here. I'm going to give her some green trousers. Let's mix up a bit more of that. So her trousers are nice and minty green. Nice. And where it's a bit puddly, I'm going to leave that. It just takes a bit longer to dry, but it will just leave a nice amount of colour on that. Now, the man's trousers, I think I'm going to go with a bit more, you know, something that an old man. I'm going to take some of this brown. You know, he looks like an older man. He's wearing a suit. So I'm just going to take some of this brown, okay, here. And I'm going to use that on his trousers. So he's going to have brown trousers. And that's his trousers there. Okay, so done all their trousers. Now while I'm on that, I'm going to give her some brown shoes. Okay, I'm going to give the girl, I'm just going to use some of this yellow here that I've got that's sort of an unusual colour. I'm just going to put that on her shoes. Okay, and the man's going to have some black shoes. So this is the black, and I'm just going to make up some black here. Okay, nice black shoes. And the boy, he's going to have white shoes, but I'm going to add a little bit of red on his, just in places to look like he's got a pair of trainers with some red on there. Okay, now that's them so far. So I've done the trousers. Now I'm going to come in, I'm going to do the tops of them. So the boy, I'm just going to use some of this red. Okay, and at this time I'm dragging my brush because I want to keep it into a nice point, and I'm spinning it as I go, because what I want to do here, I want to leave some of the white, and I'm going to give him a stripy red shirt. Okay. Okay. Nice. Okay, so that's his top. And I've not worried too much of whether the lines are nice and straight, but that just gives the effect that I want. Okay. And with the girl, what I'm going to do with her is I'm going to take another colour. Let's take this nice pink here. This pinky colour here. And all I'm going to do with her, let's create some pink right there. And with her, all I'm going to do, I'm going to put some spots on her top. Okay. Not worrying too much about whether they join together, but that's the girl's top. She's got a spotty top on. Okay, now the man, I'm going to take some of that brown that I had, and with the man, I'm just going to add a bit of black to that to make it a bit darker. Okay. A little bit in both, and I'm just going to take this and I'm going to put that on the man's jacket. Okay, and so that's the man's jacket, making sure that I don't go on his beard. Okay, so that's quite thick, so that's going to take a little while to dry. Okay, so that's the man so far. Now you'll notice here what I've done is I've accidentally got my hand into the paint and then smudged it, and there's nothing I can do about that now. That's, you know, it's not too bad, but it's just be careful that it's better just to be patient and let things dry. I'm rushing a little bit. Okay, so I'm quite happy with the clothing so far. Why don't you go ahead now and paint the clothing of your people whatever way you want. Experiment, try different colours, try different patterns, and see how far you get. So I'll see you in a minute. Okay, so we're nearly done. The last thing we want to do now is we want to do the hair, and we want to do the books and the papers that are in the bird's mouth, and then we're pretty much done. Then I'm going to show you one little technique if you want to add a bit more colour all over. Now you can see my water's got a little bit dark. I should change it now, but I've got to go all the way to the kitchen to do it, so I'm just going to use this. And you know, it may ruin the colours of my paint, but it'll be all right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to mix up the colours for the hair. So I'm going to take some of this yellow as one colour. Okay, that's probably going to be enough for one person. Then I'm going to take this yellow, clean it off a little bit. I don't mind that there's a bit of brown in there, because what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to mix that up, and that's going to be my second colour. It's a mousy browny yellow colour for the hair. Okay, so two of my people are going to have, so one of my persons is going to have blondie hair. Then I'm going to take some of this black. I could use the grey here, but I don't tend to use grey. I tend to just use very watered down black. So I don't need much black. So I'm I'm just going to meet the black there, and then we're pretty much there. So what I'm going to do first of all, I'm going to come in and let's have a look at this boy. So the boy's going to have blonde hair. So his hair, I'm just going to do over the top here. Actually, I'll mix the two yellows together, and I'm just going to leave that. I'm not worrying about keeping within the lines. I'm just colouring in above his head to look like he's got big fluffy blonde hair. Right, then the little girl and the woman at the back, I'm going to use some black here. Okay, and all I'm going to do here is fill in this area. Okay, she's got nice dark hair, and just being careful that I don't get it on the face. So that's her hair, and then the mum at the back, or the woman at the back. Okay, I'm gonna leave some of it white. Okay, I'm gonna need to mix some more black because I haven't got enough. Okay, and now I'm gonna come across the top of her head, down the side here, making sure I try not to get it onto the green sleeves, right? And so actually what I might do is just do some crazy bits coming out like so. So that's the hair of the lady, and with the man I'm going to go as well, but this time what I'm going to do is I'm just going to water it down quite a lot because I want it to look a bit grey, and here I'm just going to come into the man's beard. Okay, but I'm going to leave quite a lot of white patches as well, and I'm going to leave his head completely bald. Okay, so that's the man and his beard. All right. Now, thinking about this, what I should have done is, to get a little bit of contrast, I should have done is, with his jacket, gone for a slightly different colour so that the beard stands out. At the moment, this guy looks a bit boring. Oh, I've just got a bit of black on his face, but that's fine. He looks a bit boring, okay? Whereas the boy and the girl, they look much more interesting because of the variety of colour. Okay, so we're nearly done. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of this, what is a yellow ochre, which is a sort of light brown colour. I'm just going to take a bit of that, mix that up, okay, add quite a lot of water, dry my brush off, and then with that, I'm just going to come in onto the bits of paper to look, so it looks old. I'm just going to put that onto there, okay. And so that is my drawing so far. I'm going to show you one more thing in a moment, but why don't you go finish off your drawing so far, and then I'm going to show you one thing in a minute, and then we'll come together and talk about the drawings and about watercolour a little bit more. Okay, so I'll see you in a minute. Okay, the last thing I'm going to do on this drawing, and this is totally optional, this could ruin your drawing if you're not careful, but sometimes the white page can seem a little bit too white, so I could put some background in. Okay, and I'm just going to use two colours for this. I'm going to use a little bit of green to suggest that there's some grass, and a little bit of blue to suggest there's some sky. Okay, now you don't need to do this at all, and ideally you want to try to keep your water clean. And I'm just going to clean up a bit of this palette here to make two colours. So I'm going to use this green here, which is Hooker's green. Okay, and I'm just, because it's never been used before, first time you use it, you need to use a lot of water. So I'm just going to make up some green here. Okay, I don't need too much, but it's better to have too much than too little. And I'm just going to add a bit more water to that, and that's going to be plenty. I want it quite runny. Okay, the runnier it is, the more translucent it is, the lighter the colour will be. If you want to make a colour lighter in watercolours, okay, you don't add white. What you do is you just use more water. And then I'm going to take this blue here, which is ultramarine, okay, which is a sort of nice blue sky colour. And I'm just going to put that next to it. I want quite a lot of this, so I'm just going to get that working well. And again, what I want is quite a lot of water. Okay, that's okay, a bit more paint, a bit more water. Okay, now ideally what I want to do now is I want to test it on a piece of paper. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to get a separate piece of paper, and I'm just going to test what that colour would look like. Now that's way too dark, so I'm just going to add a whole load more water to that pigment. And then we'll watch what happens. So this time you can see it's a lot lighter. Okay, so I'm going to use that one, and what I'm going to do with this blue colour, just add a bit more water to make it even lighter, okay, is I'm just going to add some squiggles around the drawing, and I'm going to spread the water out so it doesn't pool. Okay, I might put a bit down here and around here, to suggest that it's a like cloudy, sunny day. Okay, but I suggest maybe you don't want to do this yet. This could potentially ruin your drawing if it looks too much. You don't want to overdo it. Okay, so I think that's enough. I'm just going to leave one more little bit up here. Okay, and so that's the blue to suggest the sky. Now I'm going to do exactly the same. Take some of this green, and all I'm going to do is sort of pretend that, oh, this might be some bushes or some long grass in the background, and I'm doing this slightly different. I'm just pulling my brush down and up, okay, to suggest that there might be some grass. Okay, so that's it done. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. A couple of things just to think about. Always what you want to do. Now, because my watercolors are my watercolors, you'll see that, you know, I don't clean my palette out unless I really need to. This palette's a bit of a mess. The best thing you can do is get a bit of clean tissue. This one's a bit dirty. Is add some water into all the paint. Okay, mix it all up. Okay, and then when it's still wet, take a tissue and just rub the paint off, and you'll see it comes off nice and easy, and that keeps it nice and clean for the next person. Okay, so that's nice and clean, so the next person that's going to use it is not going to find that the palette's messy. There's nothing worse than finding the palette messy and you have to clean it. Now some of these are still a little bit wet, so it might be a good idea to allow it to dry. If you don't use it for a while, they can go moldy, but I'm just going to pop the lid on and we're done. Okay, now I'm going to leave that to dry, and you know, hopefully you enjoyed, and keep practicing your watercolor. The key thing about watercolor is practice, 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 and you'll get there in the end. And it's all about experimenting and trying out different things. So I've learned to use watercolors by just keep trying, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work, and finding out techniques that work well. Okay, now the one thing you will find with this paper is it's not very good for watercolor, but you can still get some nice effects, as you can see. So hopefully you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you again in the next one. Keep drawing, keep doodling, keep up the good work, guys, and I'll see you soon.